Let me welcome my guests to the studio and those who are joining us via Zoom so that we can begin the discussion. My guests joining us for the first segment of the discussion, which will be very brief, will be convener, Individual Bondholders Forum, joining us via Zoom, Senyor Hosi. Dr. Theo Champong is economist and political risk analyst, also joining us by Zoom. When we get to the COVID-19 fund accounting matters and the NDC's reshuffle, Kofi Adams is MP Buem and member, Public Accounts, Defense and Interior Committees of Parliament. He's in the studio. Sylvester Tete is MP Botiano, English Yamanfrom, and Vice Chairman, Communications Committee of Parliament. Suleiman Abrahima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. He joins us via Zoom. This show is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance, simply dial *165# on the MTN to join. And St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters.
Once we all acknowledge that this debt exchange program is important for us to get a move from the SLA into an F-fund board decision, then the question becomes, how do we, quote unquote, burden share in the process? And how do we also acknowledge the idiosyncratic livelihoods of people versus the balance of the fund program? And so that's what we will seek to do before the end of the program, and for at least 80% of us to join it. And I'm confident that we'll be able to harness that.
The concern is that, well, will this thing be extended again?
No, I don't think so. I'm confident that we'll get there. You know, we have done the staff level agreement, as you know. We met with the Paris Club membership, and we have given them till end of February for us to go through what we call the common framework, or some version of it, but that should be facilitated. And then we expect them to go to board in Washington in March. So really, we don't have that type of time.
I personally look at the problem and what has been proposed and thought as follows. The starting point would be to establish what those debt obligations are in the first place, which of course I'm sure are very well known to government, the basis on which they've structured this proposed solution. Once we define clearly what our debt service obligations are, then the next step to actually take is to look critically at government expenditure and government revenues to see what can be done to enhance our debt service capacity. And as I said in an article I wrote recently, we should begin to look closely at our expenditures. Okay. What expenditures can we cut out? Maybe new, not very essential capital projects. What can we suspend? Ongoing, maybe unnecessary capital projects.
Right. So you had the finance minister in that exclusive interview with George Weafe on PM Express last week. And then you also had Togbe Afede, who has sufficient experience in this area of finance and economy. Also, he was appealed to by the individual bondholders. Just like the Catholic Bishops' Conference, they also issued a statement yesterday asking that things don't seem to be right. In a part of the statement, they say, in the light of what is happening, we are troubled that the position so far adopted by government lacks consensus, resulting in the strong reactions witnessed in the recent past. And they make some recommendations. They say to win the international community over in pursuit of this, government must present a posture that is consistent with the fact that the country is in dire straits or crisis. These include, but certainly not limited to, avoiding the reported expected expenditure overruns in the 2023 budget, drastic government expenditure control by reducing the number of government appointees, the part that the president doesn't want to hear, suspending non-essential projects, and a review of the free SHS policy. And then they say, while we expect government to consider these suggestions, we humbly appeal to Ghanaians to appreciate the current economic situation and understand that there will be difficulties in the coming month while the problem is solved permanently. I'm reading from a statement issued by the National Catholic Secretariat, the Catholic Bishops' Conference, and it's under the hand of Most Reverend Matthew K. Jemfi, Bishop of Siani and President of the Ghana Catholic Bishops' Conference. So, not speaking any different language from Togbe Afede and many others that we have heard. Let's bring on Senior Hosi and Dr. Theophilus A. Champong on the latest development. Thank you, gentlemen, for making the time to join us. As we know now, the Ghana Association of Banks, they have signed on. They signed on the 23rd of January. Ghana Insurance Association, they signed on the 26th of January. The Securities Industries signed on the 27th of January. The only group left is the individual bondholders that is seeking a complete no deal. How do you proceed, Senor? Okay, let me, please unmute your mic.
Very well. We're privileged to have met the minister yesterday, and we foremostly wanted to congratulate him as well as discuss our issues. I mean, the progress he's made so far is fantastic. Do we need a DDE as an economy? It's one of the options that's on our table, and achieving the DDE would also definitely help us attain the sustainability that's required and help trigger the reforms or the transformation of our economy. So conceptually, we are not opposed to the DDE in principle. What we have argued is that extending that to individuals is what actually going to be economically catastrophic, socially unsustainable, and I don't even want to talk about the politics related to it. And these are the reasons. While you have the banks, the insurers, really sit down in this entire pool of investors and having these negotiations with government, because they are structured entities, government has actually put in insulating mechanisms to help them recover. So there's a financial stability fund. Mm-hmm. There are forbearances that have been granted them by the central bank. There's a reduction in their capital adequacy ratio, their cash reserve requirements. All these things help them recover. Unfortunately for individuals, there's no option like that. So your only recovery is for you to really hit the floor really hard and pray you survive, which is not something that's sustainable. What is even more critical is the savings culture and investment culture in the country. For every economy to really thrive, it really needs savings to grow. Every economy has households, and by that extent, we are talking about individuals, as the primary source of loanable funds. It is not the firms, it is not government. Firms and government actually take money from the economy to run the wheels of the economy. Households provide money into the economy. So when you crush the confidence of households or individuals in investing in the economy, you're actually going to be transforming this crisis into a very big economic crisis. We've been claiming that it's more like a fiscal crisis because it's something that's happening on government's expenditure and revenue side, but it will cascade into something that's more unsustainable. That is why we must protect this particular subsector. There are no structures for it. And when you crash the confidence, you have a problem. I'll give you an example before it possibly just come in. The auctions that we are having now for our treasury bills that's supposed to fund government short-term needs are failing. They are failing. Why? People have lost confidence in government's financial instruments, and more importantly, in the entire financial system. People want to take out their money and keep them under their pillows. People want to convert them into dollars and keep them in a safe. That will kill the economy. And that's why we must protect this economy by keeping individuals out. And I think that's been said.
The bottom line of the of the report of the Government of Ghana Individual Bondholders Forum Technical Committee on the exclusion of individual bondholders from the Domestic Debt Exchange Program. The report is dated the 25th of January 2023. And I find that you are a signatory representing the convener of the Individual Bondholders Forum. And then Mr. Samuel Akest is a director with the Ministry of Finance. The conclusion of that is what? That you have presented to the minister or government and expect them to comply with or to use to exempt individual bondholders?
What the committee really did was first to really appreciate what government challenges were and also to explore whether individuals can actually help solve the problem. What we had recommended we had proposed in our initial petition to the minister indicated we didn't think we should be part of it. But we also told the minister that we have policy capacity to help him navigate the entire challenges. So we filed our recommendations, and these recommendations were reasonably vetted and largely considered very reasonable by the entire committee. And that's been tabled. Yesterday at our meeting with the minister, he was very grateful for the inputs that were made. And actually, if I should quote him, he said, this is something Ghana must definitely do. So there are options to this entire challenge, but he needs to also deal with short-term issues. And that's why he thinks restructuring the debt may help, which we don't oppose.
You gave as many as 18 recommendations, is it not? My question is,
absolutely,
what is central for
you? 20.
What's the bottom line?
Actually, 20 recommendations.
Okay.
There were two more which were not part of the expenditure and the revenue. We had them as other recommendations.
So what is central? What is central in your recommendation that must lead to the total exemption of individual bondholders?
Largely, the creation of fiscal space to service government debt. If we can actually create 83 billion. Let's say we are even going to probably realize 50% of that. That in itself is the biggest contribution that anybody could make to this entire exercise. The banks are not going to make that contribution. Insurance will make that contribution. If government's fiscal decisions on revenue, expenditure, and the other interventions that we recommended, even be able to achieve 50% of that, it's one of the biggest wins that they have. And I think that it's something that is clear, doesn't re-emphasize the need for individuals to participate in this entire exercise.
Right. So you say that the measures proposed per the estimation of the Individual Bondholders Forum yield a net savings of 83.5 billion Ghana cedis. The IBF holds the position that the recommendations are competent enough to urgently address the fiscal challenges and enable us to reach the desired 55% debt to GDP target proposed to the IMF. So your position is that, once again, you don't actually need individual bondholders in this business.
Absolutely, Samson. I'll tell you, if government we work together on this one, the government will actually have its eligible debt target by 60%. I mean, just doing this alone. The only thing is that some of these measures are also a bit medium term. As in short term, in that I guess a lot of them are achievable in this year. A lot of them are achievable in this year. Some may be achievable over a course of 2 years. Remember this entire IMF program and this target that we are talking about, 55%, is for 2028. It's not that government is supposed to achieve 55% today. No, by 2028. But even with these measures, government can actually achieve clearly only on this about 30 to 40% of its of a reduction in this targeted debt. So it's not something that can't be done. It can be done, but it can be a mix of things. In solving this problem, government has maybe two major options. You have debt operations, and you also look at fiscal readjustments. What we have recommended are fiscal readjustments, which are very practical. Government had recommended debt operations. So we can blend both. And in blending both, I think we can win as a country. The banks have made some commitment that enables government to bring in the debt operations. Insurers have also done the same. The central bank, often people don't mention, is equally participating in this entire exercise. They are easily the single largest exposed entity in this entire debt conversation. But they're also participating in there. So when the individuals now come up with fiscal readjustments and you blend both, we should be winning together as a country. Another thing you may have missed, even in this exercise, we as individuals have actually given government leads that actually put increased tax burden on us, which government actually had missed. So we are even also putting our skin in the game. So all of us as a country would have to work together for us to win. Ghana is one, and we must make Ghana work.
All right. Dr. Theo Champong, you have seen what has happened so far in the course of this week, and the deadline is just by the corner. Is it 2 days or 3? Then we are done. So what do you say? Good success for the bankers, insurers, and the securities, but the individual bondholders, what do you say? Do you suspect they will get anything? Because the government has not officially also stated its position on what will happen to them.
Yeah, good morning. And I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Very clearly.
I think we need to acknowledge the fact, rightfully, that some good progress has been made on the whole domestic debt exchange program. And like Senior was saying, you have 3 of the important stakeholder groups now agreeing through their associations to be a part of that process with, revised terms that the government is offering to them. So specifically, we have, like you mentioned, the securities agencies, we have the banks, we have the insurance companies, of course, there's the central bank and the like in the collectively, when you add all of them up, it is possible to actually get about 65-70% participation in the program. And what that then means is that you don't necessarily actually need the individual bondholders for this to become a success in that regard. Again, let me just reiterate Senior's point here. With the institutions, they have fail-safe or safeguard measures that they can fall back on. We're talking about the Stability Fund, and we're talking about other changes to the way they report their capital requirements, etc. So there's some sort of incentive in there that allows them to partially mitigate the effect of the restructuring, exercise. But with the individual bondholders, it becomes quite tricky because they don't have anything like that. And the consequence of, them participating in this exercise, even under the revised or restructured terms, on the wider economy is going to be actually quite that. So I think that it's still possible to actually conclude this exercise with the institutions and not include the individual bondholders, just like the government actually offered at the very beginning of this exercise. And there's an interesting statement or quote in what the government said with the insurance, the Securities Industry Association in the press release from yesterday. The 2B of the statement talks about, quote, the collective investment schemes and individuals who hold bonds in trust accounts with the Securities and Exchange Commission approved firms would be offered any enhanced commercial terms agreed with, or, and this is the important part, exemptions granted to individual bondholders. So I think it's very much possible that in the next 2 or 3 days before the exercise ends, we might maybe see a statement coming through that the individual bondholders perhaps are exempted, and those other individuals who have their investments in these collective investment schemes would also be partially or fully exempted. That then would ensure that, for me, the process is fair and there's a sense of burden sharing. But at the moment, yes, good progress has been made, and it is possible to conclude this exercise with the institutional players and not necessarily include the individual bondholders, because the socioeconomic consequences of that would actually be quite dire if we were to move that trajectory.
Right. And you find the proposals by the committee that was set, the technical committee that was set up, the proposals on the side of the individual bondholders, you find them reasonable and something that the ministry must adopt?
These are the same things that we've been talking about for the last, 3-4 years, about the fact that you need to live within your means on the expenditure side, but of course you need to raise additional revenue as well. So, I mean, they did a good piece of work by bringing on the table in excess of 83 billion Ghana cedis of potential, revenue or savings that can be made. And it's actually quite an important point here. Let it not, or the impression has been created as though it is just a domestic or a debt exchange program. We need to address what actually led us to this point in the first instance, which is that we have been living recklessly, we've been living beyond our means, and to an extent we have mismanaged some of the economic gains that we made a few years ago. Classic example being just the Auditor General's report into the COVID funds.
Right.
You can see the wastage within the system. Those are the big issues that we need to tackle. And so the IBF is very much on point in highlighting where we can make savings and in highlighting the fact that this conversation goes beyond just debt restructuring. It's a bigger issue of economic governance.
Right. I've heard it suggestions that it may take a whole generation to correct the problem with the financial sector after this program. Coming from where we are coming from, the DKMs or whatever, the men's gold, the bank and financial institutions collapse, and then suddenly now the most trusted source of investment also is suffering this. But the suggestion by the Catholic Bishops' Conference, they say, whilst they require everything, they ask all of us to, as it were, appreciate the current economic situation and understand that there will be difficulties in the coming month. There are those who suggest that we must be part of this. It's already come on us. So we must be willing to let go of something. Shouldn't the individual bondholders, and I think I'm one of them, do I think, or in fact I am, shouldn't they be thinking that something must give from their end as well?
Yeah, but something must give. They're already giving away in terms of the inflation that they're suffering, right? Or actually, Ghanaians are collectively, suffering. We're talking 50% inflation currently. So already, the money that you have doesn't go that far. We're talking about, hikes in the cost of goods and services across the board. So for me, I don't think necessarily that something must give translates into further impoverishing Ghanaians. I strongly disagree with that view, especially when you're not offering any other alternative, right, to them on the table. And as they have shown, and as those of us in civil society have shown, the biggest problem in the room here is not Ghanaians. The biggest problem in the room is the Ghanaian government, which has led us down this pathway of now having to comprehensively restructure the country's debt. And it is very possible for the government to cut part of its expenditure and to raise other revenue without burdening Ghanaians further and without further sort of impoverishing Ghanaians and creating more inequality and inequity in the system. So I think we are already doing our bit as citizens in sharing the burdens. And I don't think there's any more that we can do much further beyond just being good citizens, maybe paying our taxes. But the biggest problem, I repeat again, is the government. And that's where we must start from.
My final question to you will be this. I want you to help us get a certain perspective. Bishop Charles Ajinasare, for example, was preaching to his congregants and disclosed that he has some 106,000 cedis in an institution, and he sought to withdraw the money. And he was told that he cannot withdraw the money, what they can do for him. And it's a favor to him because he is, if you like it, a VVIP. I mean, there's no question about that. So he can get 1,000 cedis of his investment each week until the debt is fully financed. That means it's going to take him how many months? 106,000 Ghana cedis. How does this happen?
Yeah, it happens because there's no liquidity within the system. So remember that if you go and give your money to a bank or an investment association, basically they don't keep all of their money with them. They have to invest that money and generate a return in order to be able to repay you back. And in an environment where there's a lot of fear and anxiety, a lot of people then tend to want to cash out of those investments. Normally, the industry ratio, I think it's probably only about 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 may walk in to demand their investment. But if you have more than that, sometimes half walking in, there's no way you'll be able to provide that money back to them because you need to exit those investments to actually create the liquidity that is required. So basically that's what's happening, that it is not as though the money isn't there, but the monies are locked up in the investments that these firms have made. So it's going to be difficult for any of the firms to be able to honor the payment obligations that are required for you. And part of the reason why that is the case is because of the whole fear of, the restructuring exercise and the anxiety that has created for a lot of investors.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Theo Champong, political risk analyst and economist. Now, you stay with us. It's Senor that takes leave of us. And Senor, so today is the 28th. What's going to happen if you don't get the total exemption that you seek?
Well, for starters, I think we also have to manage that part of the communication. The truth is, it is a voluntary exercise. The minister has made it clear that it's voluntary. And yesterday we met with him, he reiterated the fact, look, it's voluntary. So it's not as though we have been forced into it that we actually even technically need some kind of exemption or not.
But we know that it is voluntary, but it is obligatory somewhat. And you have been told that if you don't do it, you are the worst for it.
So it was first. Well, it was first presented as voluntary by force. But right now, I think that from our engagements with the minister yesterday, it is voluntary. And he is committed to that. He was very emphatic that for individuals, there'll be no punitive action for you if you do not accept the DD. But he would encourage that as a community, to the extent that we can all support the country, we do. And I think that we've exercised that through our participation in this committee and very strong recommendations to have about 83 billion, almost 84 billion saved that can help him also manage affairs, which he was very grateful for. So as of yesterday, for us as individuals, the voluntary is now voluntary, no more voluntary by force.
Okay.
But, Samson, we just need to protect this subsector. The key challenges that were mentioned with this illiquidity from Ajinasare is because there's total uncertainty. But once we are done with this exercise, this market is going to be back. Our country is going to be back. The liquidity is going to be restored. But we all have a responsibility to help government restore confidence in the financial system.
All right.
It didn't manage the communication well. Let's be very clear about that. Government really managed this so woefully. But it can be fixed, and together we need to work to fix it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senor Hosi. And I want to give you just a minute each to address this issue. There are many who are worried, concerned, and if you read from experts, including Togbe Afede's presentation, if you read from many people, including people who are known to be with this government, the government is asking people to do something, but they are asking, what are you giving? And President Mahama in London yesterday, you know, we understand he was at Chatham House, and he spoke and said, you're asking everybody to sacrifice, but you are not. You know, nothing seems to be changing. Kweku Nchubu Esiaku says, something must give, but government gives nothing. A government whose mismanagement brought us here. Nobody must sacrifice to prop up this unfit for purpose government. You heard Kwame Pieni, he says his one kobo will not go into it. I walk into the bank and I saw people doing their stuff, and I try to also say, please don't don't roll over when my thing matures. And as I try to do it, deep within me, something tells me, if all of us are doing this, then we are crashing the economy. So government must do something.
Well, thank you very much, Samson, and good morning to you. Good morning to Senor and Doc, and good morning to my good brother Kofi, and to my constituents, those who are watching from BNA, Botiano English I'm from. Of course, I've been going through the report of the individual bondholders on this technical committee report. Indeed, what is happening is not pleasant, and nobody will, in the split of a second, think that is pleasant for this country. Something, I'll tell you what, we are afloat and holding ourselves where we are today simply because our country or economy is largely informal. So there are a lot of people who are oblivious to what is happening. The market woman, those who go to the shop and come back, they don't keep their monies in the banks and all that. And that has a huge toll on this economy over a long period of time. So we've been making an effort to ensure that we do financial inclusion to bring these people on board. Those already included in the financial sector, that is beneficial to this economy for liquidity purposes, this is what is happening. So you can imagine, people now have the laxity to stay in their comfort zone. So we are really keeping afloat simply because of the huge numbers of people who on daily basis do transactions and they are not banked. And that is a problem we have. You know of DKM and all these institutions that took advantage.
So my specific question for you guys, only for a minute, is that
I'm coming there.
Is that the expectation is that for government to show appreciation, that to show that it appreciates where we are,
right?
It should be cutting this, you know, big government, cutting it to half.
Well, something where I sit and where the president sits are two different positions. And like I said on another network, that the president first term had 122 ministers and deputy ministers. His second term, he reduced it to 85 ministers and deputy ministers.
And we cannot applaud him for doing that. He set his own record and then worked on it.
I mean, let's follow the trajectory.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying that from 122 to 85 ministers and deputy ministers, it's obvious, it's become so evident to everybody that in the face of this crisis, government must still reduce its size. But the question that we ask, and I haven't seen that in all the analysis people have done, that reduce government size from current 85 ministers and deputy ministers to say 60 or 50. What would be the gain? But of course, the biggest gain here,
Professor Stephen Adair says you can even get to 44.
Well, you can even do 20. I mean, this any people can have, you can do 20.
Yes. Dr. Ndum promised that he will do 20 ministers.
Well,
yes, go ahead.
Well, I don't want
You said what would be the gain?
Yes. You said I'm saying the biggest gain here is the confidence that it gives to the economy. That is number one confidence that we can all. So clearly, we all know ministries, departments, and agencies, and the role of many ministries. The president, there's reshuffle in the offing. Perhaps he will further listen.
Reshuffle in the offing.
Of course, I mean,
We have heard that. We are tired.
we are tired
I
of
think we are very
hearing-
interested in
So
that.
something, clearly what is happening, we are all not happy about it. And I tell you what, this is not NDC or NPP matter, because it affects all of us. I'm included, you are, my brother Kofi, and everybody. This is where we are. But I think that what the Ministry of Finance have failed to do over time was to have started the engagement much earlier.
Okay.
You see the position of the individual bondholders and the forum. They were quite hostile. But today, Senior Hosi in his own comment says that they applaud the minister for the kind of engagement and where they've got into. And I think if we had started this much earlier, we wouldn't have gotten where we are.
And
now we have two.
Bryce Simmons showed us other countries where they have done this. It took some of them 18 months. It took some of them up
I was
to
going to
30
that
months
point.
or more. Some of them, to do the negotiation. In our case, it started when? Just how many weeks? And we are concluding. Yes, Kofi, just a minute. We want to take a break and come to deal with the budget, COVID-19.
Good morning and Happy New Year to you. We haven't seen each other
That's
for
right.
a very
Good morning.
long time.
Right.
And to my colleague, Tete, good morning. Viewers, I greet you all and others on Zoom. Samson, the summary of all this is that government, he says it's not partisan, that's true, so I'm not going to mention MPP. Government has totally failed Ghanaians. He's failed Ghanaians, he's failed persons who trusted government and trusted this country. The colors that they saw Ghana, the red, the green, and the yellow with the black star, and had confidence in it, that we put our money in there, they have failed them. They have failed on all fronts. The question is, how did we get here? Samson, were we warned or advised? Sometimes you get into a situation where you have not been warned, you have not been advised. It crashes you and say, okay, I haven't been advised, but we were forewarned. We had every information to have avoided this. We had every information to have engaged earlier. But this government decided that they will do their own thing. And some leaks or documents that have been intercepted showed that even at cabinet level, they had their own mind, thinking that they could use force. They could even come to parliament if they had the numbers to get parliament to pass laws to just abruptly implement a
It
program.
was advice sought from the Attorney General, who is part of the government, and they advised that it can only be
They can.
voluntary.
I'm telling
So
you,
that's not a secret.
no, Samson. Yes, Samson. I am only telling you what leaders we have elected were thinking. I'm only saying that.
Government.
No, to even Samson, to even begin to think about that before even seeking advice, to tell you how dangerous they are. That let's just use force. People's investments.
Okay, Kofi.
People's investments
yeah.
that they've put in there, a government decide its own recklessness that has brought us these bad results. You sit there, and this is what you were thinking, bet for the Attorney General.
But Samson,
All right, we have to go on a break. I gave you guys just a minute each.
Let me make a quick point
but you have not committed to it the way I expected.
It's not just started. You see, there are things we've done over time, since 30 years and so that has culminated into where we are.
What do you say to those who say for the president to still keep Ken Ofori-Atta, whom some of you wanted dismissed?
I want him.
It means he doesn't understand what is going on. He's not making the necessary sacrifice.
The fact that you want him out, for instance, I want Ken Ofori-Atta out, and I've been advocating that Ken Ofori-Atta out.
You wanted
it doesn't mean the president doesn't know what he's doing.
But you are allowing him to interject into my 1 minute that you.
You are done with your 1 minute. You are done.
We are taking a break here.
Okay, so when we get back, then I'll conclude.
Oh, you not conclude on this. Okay, do that in 30 seconds.
Clearly, he was trying to say that blame be passed on to some others. At the time they took over, debt our debt to GDP level was 56%. Today, what is it? It's more than 100%. So you cannot transfer this blame to anybody.
Thank you very much.
It is something you brought.
This is where we take a break.
Don't
And we return to look at the Auditor General's, examination of our accounts as far as the COVID-19 expenditure is concerned. We'll be right back.